people also online maybe, or so I'm happy to present Dr. Julie Morin today. I will explain you what is her experience briefly. She received training in geography at the Sorbonne in Paris before doing a PhD in earth science in Réunion Island at the University of Réunion in France. And so she was working on volcanic crisis management for her PhD. Afterward, she had various experiences in postdoc, various postdoctoral experiences in various countries, mainly France, then Singapore, then France again with Clermont-Ferrand, where she worked on the same kind of projects. And finally, she arrived in the UK at Cambridge, where she's working currently. So something noticeable about Julie is that she works a lot in the field. She's doing a lot of field work and long field work, long-term field works. So she has been working in Asia, mostly in Indonesia for this, and in Central America and South America since I'm not sure, since the PhD or afterward.
In South America?
Yes.
I began during my last postdoc position.
Okay. So during her last postdoc, and she visited, you will see a lot of countries in South America and Central America. And so she developed projects on reduction of vulnerability of volcanic hazards and tsunamis, mostly. And then she also worked in projects about risk education and crisis communication and management. So she will present you her most recent project in Cambridge, and I let her start now.
Well, thank you very much, Stephanie. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be in Barcelona and with you to share about science in this institute. I'm going to present you today a sub-project that I developed in the framework of the main project which employs me. This sub-project is Volcano Voices, so I'm going to tell you about it in a minute. And I'm going to briefly talk to you about the Imagine project, which is a European-funded project led in collaboration with many different people in Central and South America, as you can see. And the aim of the Imagine project is basically to understand how the different knowledge and perceptions of the volcanic environments and in the context of climate change are framed, how they are built, how they are exchanged between different groups, how they are transformed, and finally, how they are able to combine with each other or not. So you can see that in this situation, it might be problematic. And for those of you who work on volcanoes, you know how difficult it can be to adjust the different views on the environment that the people have, the scientists have, and the authorities have on how to deal with a volcanic environment and a volcanic crisis. So for a geographer as me working on disaster risk, working on volcanoes is either paradise or just the infierno for a very specific reason, which is that volcanic hazards represent the hazards with the highest range of spatial and temporal extensions. So on this graph by Jill and Malamud, you can see on the horizontal axis the geographical scale, and on the vertical one, the temporal scale, so from seconds to millennium. And the geographical, I don't know why it's switching automatically. And you can see that the volcanic hazards have the highest range of spatial and temporal extension. And you know that it's also a multi-hazard with multiple potential impacts associated. That small eruptions, like in Armero, if it rings a bell, can trigger massive disasters. And so there is a very high uncertainty in terms of risk and crisis management. And apart the fact that Jill and Malamud probably underestimated this spatial extension and temporal extension, because we know that volcanic eruptions can last also for decades in some cases. So very complicated hazard context, but the experiences on past crisis and disaster show that it's not the hazards which trigger the disasters, but most of the time the decisions that societies take in the face of disasters. And that in some cases, like in Montagne Pelée or in Armero in Colombia, authorities couldn't take the right decisions and disasters happen. Or reversely at Pinatubo, it was a success in communication and they were able to save lives. So in this context of high hazard uncertainty, it's very difficult to take informed decisions and to provide accurate and timely information. And people's behavior, communities' behavior are based on this information. So how do we do when this information can't be provided, but that we expect people to react in the face of this information? Given that they also react depending on many, many different other factors. So I wanted to show you this small cartoon because I found it interesting. The volcano is shaking and this indigenous community begins to think about how to cope with that. And the chief engineer apparently gives the instructions to build something which turns out to be, I'm sorry, I don't know what it's automatically going to the next slide, which turns out to be a magma lamp. So I like this metaphor because in this case, it represents the belief they have, like they are adorating the volcano, but it also represents a physical protection, and we can relate to the current eruption in Iceland, where they are trying to build walls to protect some of the infrastructures. So there are many different ways to behave, but some of them might not be the way we expect people to behave. Meanwhile, it's logical. So authorities and scientists tend to believe that people react in an unlogical way, while it's always logical, and it believes specific patterns that as social scientists, we study in different ways. And so in social sciences, there are three main paradigms that explain how people face and react in front of disaster. The first one is the dominant paradigm, which came first, which considers that if you have a good risk perception, if you understand hazards, if you trust authorities, if you have this good perception, you will react correctly. In fact, it's not always the case, and you have communities with high risk perception, which are not always able to cope well with an eruption, for instance, because, and it came after, as after contesting the dominant paradigm, it's clearly shown that the daily socio-economical constraints are clearly a major incentive of behaviors in front of the volcanic risk and in volcanic environments. So as an example, during my PhD, I was working in communities where you had lahars because of an eruption of Karthala volcano on Grand Como Island. And the villages were completely invaded by lahars, which provided a sound resource that people could use to build or to sell. And so some of the people in the communities began to dig channels to direct more lahars to the community so that they could access to the resource. So the logical of the behaviors is really economically dependent and sometimes completely opposed to what we would expect. And finally, the last paradigm we have in the disaster literature and behaviors is the disaster one, disaster preparedness one, which stipulates that if you don't have cars, alert signs, alerts to evacuate, and authorities to help you with plans to react, it doesn't serve in anything to have the good risk perception or to be fit economically. You have to have these three conditions that meet to be able to react correctly. And even with that, it's very complicated to understand how people may react. And usually in social sciences, we basically try to say, yeah, people will react like that. They say they would react like that. While the reality is this, with the volcanic risk. So in the project we are developing Volcano Voices, we tried to find techniques, methods to be able to relate on these different things. So what is Volcano Voices? It's a map on the departmental website in which are embedded 360 degrees pictures. And in each picture, you have clickable icons with different sort of contents that I will develop later. We have developed it until now in 15 sites in 4 different countries. And I'm going to give you the example of the two most advanced one. So the first one is Añas Huayco. It's an ignimbrite quarry in Peru at the feet of Chachani and Misti volcanoes. So the ignimbrite formed 1.6 million years ago. And you have miners who are still mining with traditional techniques, blocks of sillar, so the ignimbrite, that's the local name, that will serve to the construction, especially in Arequipa and all this region of Peru. And the second example will be in Chaiten, which is a small town south of Chile, where quite massive eruption happened in 2008, and I will come back on it. The interesting thing is that you can develop Volcano Voices for completely different purposes, and we always develop it depending on the local needs of the community we are collaborating with. So in the case of Añas Huayco, the miners who are organized in an association asked us to develop the project in the quarry to valorize their geopatrimony, the mining techniques, and they want to use it as a touristic development tool. In Chaiten, it's a completely different story. We developed it as a volcanic risk education tool. It was also asked by the community and specifically by the local museum that has been put in place to memorialize the 2008 disaster. So in 2008, Chaiten volcano erupted, massive lahars were triggered, and the city, as you can see, was cut in two and mostly destroyed. And you had a very conflictive post-disaster resettlement with people not agreeing with the authorities on the modalities of reconstruction. You had major demographic changes, a lot of new people, and all the kids who cannot remember the eruption. So you have a loss of memory because of these demographic changes. And overall, people believe that the 2008 eruption was unique, while the geological records show that there have been many other eruptions of that type, and that the town, is implemented on an alluvial delta that would be hit again by lahars in case of an eruption or by pyroclastic flows. So they created the museum to memorialize the event. And all these conditions, all these different points made Chaiten the first place where we developed the project, and a very cool one to develop the project, especially as it's raining a lot, and you will see that it's interesting to work on the pictures when it's raining 7 hours a day, and you basically can't go outside to make the traditional walking interviews that we do in geography with people to understand the territory. In terms of development of the project, how it happens with the communities concretely, well, we have many different discussions before beginning the project. Then we lead semi-structured interviews on volcanic risk, but not only, on many different things of the daily life and whatever the people want to tell us about. They create their own map of the places, of the sites that are of importance to them on the territory. And for each of the locations they have defined, we create a 360-degree picture, either by drone or with either a tablet or a specific 360 camera. Once all the pictures are created, we go back to the community and we make specific interviews to create contents on these specific places they have defined on the map. So that's their ID, their map, the places they define, and the content they want to put in. We use a platform online which is called Mardipano. We import the 360 images which have been created. And once the images are imported, we embed the info hotspot, as you see. Each hotspot we embed in this platform will become on the map one of the clickable icons you can click on to access the content. So everywhere we have important information from the people who talk to us, we put a hotspot. And we can link some of those spots to other places on the map. So you don't have to go back to the main map. You can just travel in between the different sites within the map. Once we have created all the info spots and linked all the things we wanted to link, we export this as a zip file. And then the magic happens with our guy at the Department of Geography who is in charge of informatics. Here comes the most dark black box part for me. So it's quite simple, he says. It's just coding so that the data is exported and embedded in the map. So now in terms of contents, you have different types of contents. The main one, as the title of the project let's suggest, is voices. So the main content is audio content. But we can also add textual information. So for instance, here, it's the landlord of this place who is talking about different stratigraphic layers and explaining that he has observed that you have different layers on his field. And he was able, without receiving any information on volcanic risk, to deduce that if he can see the layers repeat, that means that the volcano will erupt again that day. So they have this idea of a cycle. So when someone gives us an information like that, we add the scientific information, either in a textual form, or we can embed maps. So you can click on this map, it opens at a bigger scale. So isopac maps, and it's intended to create a level of understanding in the project that is dedicated, in this case, to geology students. So you can have different approaches of the project. And we can also embed pictures. You can scroll down with different pictures and again, links to other places on the map. And next, once the content is created, we have different access mode. We work so in Chaiten with a local museum, well, with a few problems those days, but I'm not going to enter this story. And so they have tablets. So they have they're supposed to have 6 tablets with specific sites they have selected on the map. So the sites they want to be highlighted on the map. And then with the QR code, you have access to the whole map. So, and these QR codes can be also displayed anywhere where you want to make a link to the map, either. So, for example, in the Agnes Waiko quarry, near some of the mining sites, you will have like this QR code to access information at the museum and other places. Now, scientifically, it's very interesting and allows to collect accurate data. This is the weather that we have in Chaitan most of the time. So it's you can imagine how complex it is when you are interviewing someone and asking to relate to the landscape. Even if the person is able with these clouds to describe the landscape, as a researcher, you are not able to see what's described. But even if the weather is good, sometimes it's just very difficult when someone is pointing something in the landscape or relating to their experience to the landscape. Sometimes it's complicated to know where exactly it's intended to point. So the 360 images and working on the 360 images allows the people to fill in their own territory, to describe things they wouldn't describe with this bad weather, and allows the researcher to connect very precisely to what the people are saying. So it's a very interesting tool in this sense. And during interviews, that's most of the time what the researcher understands when you speak with someone for 2 to 4 hours about the landscape. You have this very vague idea of things. And even the people might have this very vague idea of things when they describe general things about their life in the territory. As soon as you go to the 360 images, it's very interesting how everything is really shaped. The narratives come out, the discourse is more open, and it's very efficient in terms of methodology. As a geographer working on interview-based projects. So we should have the sound. No, maybe not. So that's in Agnes Waiko, so the mining, the Inambrit quarry. And no, I don't have the sound, not a problem. Next, we will listen to 2 different sounds on the next.
Son rocas más oscuras, bien oscuras, que nos están representando los huaycos y los jales.
So this was an Ingemet scientist talking.
Acá le decíamos yoke, después ya no le decíamos yoke, después le decíamos torrentera, ahora no se dice torrentera, ahora se dice white, ahora no dice white, ahora dice Natales. Pero anteriormente nosotros estábamos llamando yoke.
So they are describing exactly the same things. So the first voice you listened to was Nelida Manrique from the National Institute of Geology and Mining from Peru. And the second person you listen was this miner. And that's the very interesting thing with this tool is you can provide different levels of information, keeping quite neutral and providing a voice to each of the persons who want to express something about the landscape or the risk. So the 2 informations are provided very horizontally. And there is not one information more important than the other. Actually, the minor information is probably more attractive to our minds than the scientific one. But it has its limitations. So I wish I could say it's completely horizontal, neutral, and that it's empowering the communities, giving them a voice. It has its limitations, for instance, in J10. So this is supposed to represent the scientist trying to draw the project and keep in the frame. And sometimes it's going a bit out of the frame. In J10, for instance, there are some conspiracy theories saying that the government tried not to allow the reconstruction on site to appropriate the territory for mining purposes. So there is no connection to any proof to sustain that, but that's what massively the community believes. So when the community massively express this sort of idea, how as a scientist, you integrate it, how you do not silence the voice of the community, but you keep an information which is scientifically consistent. So the idea here is to go back to CERN, which is the National Geological and Mining Institute, and ask them to give their own perspective, or to the local authorities. So sometimes we have to go back to make to create more content, just to be able to balance without silencing, to balance the content so that we are not providing, we are not promoting in this case like conspiracy theories, which would be a main problem. These are other examples.
Que algún día despertará nuevamente, nosotros ya sabemos qué es lo que tenemos que hacer, porque sabemos las consecuencias que pueden traer. Es un discurso que se puede sacar continuamente. Y sobre todo, hay fumarolas que al entorno de la boca misma existen, se notan, crecen las madrugadas. Arriba, caía nevada, y todo el año con agua. Me van con la nieve, tanto como el místico como Chachane también. Pero nada, ahora ya no me va, ya no me va.
So I'm going back to the something interesting. So with the use of this method is that it's generally quite complicated for people to relate to climate change or unusual hazards, and reading the landscape allows them to relate about this. So I was talking about the level of snow which is changing on the mountains. If you go to someone and ask him, what about the climate change in your area? It's so abstract that most of the time they even wouldn't understand the question, and we would have trouble to answer it probably ourselves. So it's very interesting. Just this connection with the landscape is really allowing to capture discourse on the environment and risk that are not captable, I don't know, another way. Other types of contents.
Antes solamente cuando venía hueco, el que estaba arriba, venía por encima avisando, en cadena, así que lo estamos abajo también así, se han salvado varios.
So in this case, it shows the opportunity to educate on multi-hazard topics.
No había transporte de vehículos, se transportaban por símbolos materiales. Y aquí se lleva la herramienta para nos referimos a ser el primer escultor erudito, porque era parte de la historia del científico. Porque antes los procesos también transportados.
And here is an example of links you can make to online contents. So this one is a short, how do you say, cartoon, but animated one, which is made at INGEMET to explain how the CER, so the Inebrita, was created. So these are many different types of contents that can be created. In terms of access to the information inclusivity, you can re-record anything in another language if you want to give it to give access to other non-native speakers to the project. You can plan transcriptions or make audio description. Well, it can be very open. So we didn't go yet for these two steps, like transcription for hearing impaired people and audio description, but it's something which is doable. Overall, in terms of inclusivity, as I told you, it allows access to remote places that are now accessible, and you can integrate absolutely any topic. So I guess in the room, each of you can relate to his own research and imagine the different topics that could be combined in such environments. And it can serve various objectives, as I said at the beginning, from preservation of the memory and geoheritage to risk education. Now, I just want to go very briefly to another case study at Mombacho in Nicaragua, just to show that it could even, this method could even have an interest in case of unrest, if it's not a very quickly developing one. And it's more the process of research than the cartographic, the mapping, the map result, which would be interesting in that case. So Mombacho is located on lake, on the shore of the Lake Cocibolca here in Nicaragua. Historically, it has experienced massive debris avalanches on the different flanks of the volcano. I don't think we see really well, but the morphology is characteristic of debris avalanches volcanoes. And in 1570, you had a debris avalanche which killed 400 people in this area. The volcano recovered, it was green again, and since a decade, there are signs of unrest. So the top of the volcano is now like that. In a decade, the whole primary forest on the top of the volcano has been killed, so it's called Bosque Muerto. And the modelization that results from the 1570 event show that a debris avalanche of just 5 million cubic meter would affect this farm here, but more than the farm, two communities, Las Colinas and Aguas Agrias, which are really just below the landslide potential trigger place. So I was telling you that the process was interesting more than the result. And in Mombacho, so this is the view you have from the farm, the view you have from the first community, Las Colinas, and the view you have from the third community. And these are views taken by drone. So you can imagine when you are just grounded that you don't see the landscape like that. While with the drone, you can see that there are changes in the landscape and that the mountain is not as green as it used to be. So we use the drone and the 360 images to engage in a conversation with the local communities, to make them aware of what's going on and try to impulse a dynamic with the local authorities so that they can discuss the modalities of potential relocation or at least emergency evacuation in case of heavy rains. And on the top of the volcano, which is a very touristic area because it's a splendid ecological reserve, there are lots of tourists coming to visit every day. So the project, in case of access restrictions, might become a sort of virtual tour, which is not the same for sure, but could allow to keep an access to this beautiful landscape. To resume the interest of the method, it's low technology, cost-effective research and communication tool. Depending on how you use it, you have seen that there are many different ways to collect and use and communicate the data. It allows creating enriched data sets, and you can integrate any topic on the different images. And importantly, it's less extractivist than just doing interviews, and that's now becoming a more and more sensitive topic. Not to go to the communities, take their knowledge, go back home, write a scientific paper, which the communities will most probably never beneficiate. So it's a new way to reward the communities, giving them back part of the knowledge they have offered to the scientists. And on the side of the communities, it's raising a lot of their curiosity and knowledge about their territory, like to be able to exchange with other people their views. It's empowering them because they can talk about their territory and then usually don't have the space to do it. It allows a memorialization of past events, like in Chaitan, and it might be useful for many different purposes, from tourism development to formal education. I think that's all. That's all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Julie. Very interesting talk. And so now if anyone has a question, I can pass the microphone, and online also if you have any question. Yep.
Thanks a lot, Julie. I really like your talk. How long do you need? How many times do you need to implement a project like that? I mean, from beginning to the end, when you deliver the final product. I mean, is a 1 year work, 6 months, 2 years?
I would say it depends on the strength of the relationship you already have with the local collaborators and communities. And it depends on the number of elements you decide to implement on the map. Something I didn't say, and I should have said, it's currently not really sexy. It's just, we're gonna develop a design which makes like the icons, different types of icons, more beautiful and that. So it depends on the content you embed in the map. But for instance, next step is in Rapa Nui, so Easter Island, in January. We have been discussing with the communities, the indigenous community, for something like a full week of discussions. I'm trying to understand how we could develop something for them. And I have 3 weeks, 100%, like 7 days on 7 in January of field work to collect the data. And the data should be ready by June. So if you have a small project and good relationships with the community, you could even, it could happen like really in a month or 2, if it was really small with good links, with good relationships. For a bigger project, I guess it can extend to 1 year. The fact we don't have a final product is because it's too many sites. It's a bit crazy. Actually, I'm not really happy with that. I think it's better to work more consistently with less communities, but this is a frame of a European project, which implies that. But yes, I would say very small, consistent with links pre-established. 1 month, 1.5 months, you could do something already nice.
Yeah, because the final product is amazing. So the capacity to transmit the scientific information to the local communities is really nice.
Yes.
And if you need help in Easter Island, we have been working there for the last 10 years. So I have quite a lot of information about dealing with climate change. So that's a thing that we can talk later on.
Sure.
Thank you, Julie. So I wanted to, so the final product, you said you don't have a final product yet,
Not yet.
but it is envisaged that it is a web page with all the sites, or each site has specific website and these are connected through a portal, or what do you have in mind?
So for now, there is one map with all the different sites. The idea for sure is have one web page for each site to contextualize the research. Like just to explain, like I did, why it was developed on this site, which was the aim. I don't know, Agnes Waiko, how the Ignimbrite formed, like some more documents, a bit of contextualization. So one page for each site, but then all the sites on the same map. There might be one restriction, and it's under discussion, so I can't say for now. The Rapa Nui community might want some restricted access. So we might have locked 360 images on the map, which are accessible just to some people with specific access. It's not ideal if you think in terms of open science. But as the aim is not really the science in this case, but more getting back to the community, what we have through the interviews, and we can consider it, given that it might be a requirement of the community.
Okay, and are you planning to do the derivative products of the webpage? I mean, special for kids or for the teenager community, because I assume this is not very user-friendly for not adults. So if you are planning to do something with this information to bring the result to younger audience.
Interestingly, I think it's more user-friendly than it looks like, because I've been surprised by my experience in Chaitan. The kids won't listen to all the contents, but just like moving into the territory, jumping from an image to the other, they're like, ah! And seeing it from drone is also impressive for them. But I agree that it's a bit like, I think, in the project, if it was extended, we should probably have thematic layers with maybe different colors for the icons. I don't know, climate change, blue icon, volcanic risk, whatever. We could have, like for the geology students, which was the idea, we could have a kid level, or in Chaitan, teenagers were able to access and very keen to participate in the project. They asked to their voice to be involved in the project, but they are teenagers. So, well, then if you wanted to make the kids participate, so I don't know if it would be like adult speaking and making nice content for kids, or kids speakings. It's completely feasible. It just requires the right ethical steps, because you can work with kids just as you want, but everything is doable. That's the very nice thing with it's. It has no pretension. It's very easy to do, and it's efficient, I think. and it can be developed by anyone. Like I'm sure in the room, like 99% of the people who know better than me how to code, and that you can develop this kind of project on your own very easily. So the idea is that it could be, the idea is not new. You had other 360 projects with voice in it. The process so is a bit new, like the process with the community, them electing the places they want to talk about and coming back to this place, making loops to be sure that they're the content they want, and that's useful to them.
How do you choose each community?
So I'm employed on this European project, and my PI, Amy Donovan, who wrote the project, had in the project formerly Chile, Argentina, and East Africa. And I arrived to the UK in 2020, full pandemic, and I was unemployed for a while, and the frontiers were closed. And the first frontier to reopen was Chile. And I was like, okay, how do we do this? Like, it has been a really weird year. It was still very restricted travel. It was, and during a Cities and Volcanoes conference, I had been very lucky to go to the Chaiten field trip. And it had impressed me a lot, and I had stayed in contact with people working there. And when I realized we could travel to Chile, I was like, okay, we should probably start with a small place where we can try the working hypothesis. And so I had some contacts, and it was a small place, and the combination of these two things and massive past disasters with people willing to talk a lot about it. So the combination of those elements made me decide, let's develop it to Chaiten. And then I began to present it to colleagues in different seminars or just discussions. And the Peruvian colleagues said, we want this. We want this in Añas Huayco. We are trying to help the miners to highlight the geopatrimony, so it was each time a local, and then Nicaragua was the same. A colleague told me, you absolutely have to go to Nicaragua. I want you there to develop this with them. They need it. They will be really keen. So each time it was a local, well, Chaiten was impulsed. And as soon as we were sure that the local museum was really willing to have it, we began to discuss. And then the other ones were based on this first experience, people asking to have the project developed for different purposes.
Just for curiosity, if you have tried this for larger, rural communities, maybe more urban, in which people is not so attached to the landscape, but they are talking to nature, and how could you use a tool like this in our settings? No?
You mean in like full urban, because I didn't listen to everything, to in full urban context, or
yes,
oppositely yes, urban context? So
cities in which people have not such a contact with nature and they don't have references, maybe, because here you are kind of linking the landscape, but you are assuming that the people is familiar with that. It's part of their environment.
Yes.
Maybe, I don't know, if you have tried this in some more urban scale areas.
I mean, it depends a lot on what you want to work about. Urban, big city would be more complex if you follow the philosophy of the project, which is the community is deciding what they want. So in a big city, a community willing to say what they want, more complex. But you could work, for instance, with, I don't know, alcaldía, yeah, mayor office or some civil protection authorities in a big city. If I think in terms of geography, risk, disaster management, in a city, there's so many things to say about just risk. So you could ask the people to relate on the height of the water that the last inundation reached. They could just tell their stories. But I think even not saying anything, like having just voices saying like, I do not understand the landscape for me or the buildings. So even if we just add that, it's already a massive piece of information on how people perceive their environment. And you could try, if it was the aim, to balance this non-content content, going to see, I don't know, like an ecologist working around and being able to input some information, depending on the topics you want to approach. But interestingly, I think what we would consider as a poor perception of the environment is a perception of the environment. So it's interesting in itself. And you could always try to counterbalance and to introduce more scientific content. So on the recording, they don't see the science. I'm putting las comillas. I don't know if it answers.
I have a question. So I understand that the tool is not fully developed, but do you have some examples maybe on, because I understand it's a multiple knowledge transfer way tool. So not only the communities are getting some information, but the scientists probably,
yes,
and the authorities. So do you have maybe an example of authorities getting some information or scientists from the other communities?
Yes, so I wouldn't say directly through the map we're creating, but the way we work when we realize the interviews. So for instance, in Chaitan, we have many different collaborators, so 2 local museums, the mayor office, the Cultural Cura, Geopark. But if we stick to Chaitan, CERN-Geomin, so the National Geology and Mining Institute, is the main scientific counterpart for us. And each time we do interviews in an anonymized way, which respects the ethics requirement, I always give back some piece of information to CERN-Geomin to let them know how people perceive the hazards, the scientists, so CERN-Geomin itself, and the many the important pieces of information, what I believe to be important, so it's subjective, but to CERN-Geomin. The thing we will do is that they will see the final draft of the project. And if they want to add important contents in terms of risk education, for instance, because it's dedicated to risk education, they would have the opportunity to embed more content if they feel it's necessary. I don't know if it responds correctly to your question. It's like just as with the community, we make loops with scientific collaborators.
I was asking because, as you know, I was working in Hawaii. And there was one of the project I showed you, story map. And the idea of the project was to use ancient texts, Hawaiian texts, to spot areas where to study with modern techniques. So I think maybe there's also some unexpected ways these maps and these tools can be used in the future. That's interesting.
Potentially, yes. Well, some testimonies by some people in Chaitan about their feelings when the eruption happened were amazing and very interesting for Senahyomin. They were describing a massive snake below their feet, which gives Senahyomin an idea of how the seismic waves came in. And the people are able to give you directions. They say it came from here to here, the sound was this way, the vibration was this way. So these elements are potentially very interesting for the colleagues working in seismology and in different fields, in hydrology sometimes, because they describe a lot things by their sound, and they know their environment by the sound it makes. So sometimes they do not see the lahars or landslides, and they do not observe them, but they hear them and they know where and how it happened because they have this experience. So that's also a piece of information that can go back to the scientist, and you can cross-check the information, as you say. Mm.
Nice, very interesting. Thank you. So I don't know if anyone has anything to add. If not, I want to thank you again. And
thank you all.
Anyone
for being
interested
here.
in chatting with Julie, she will be here until Friday. So do not hesitate.
Thank you very much.